Wall-to-wall coverage of the Kibra by-elections. We're keeping an eye on the developments there. We'll be crossing over to our reporters. We're covering all the 183 polling stations there in the 5 different wards as the people elect their leader out of 24 candidates. Exactly. In case you're just joining us, these are the numbers that you need to keep in mind. 24 candidates are in this race, 183 polling station. According to the new census results for 2019, 185,777 residents or the Kenyans live in Kibra. Out of that number, 118,658 will be taking part in today's by-election to make sure that Kibra goes out to choose their next legislator. 5 wards, and these are the numbers standing in regards to that. Absolutely. Laini, Saba, 17,455. Lindi, 16,688. Makina, 25,695. Woodley, 28,066. And Sarangómbe, 30,754. We also have our guest in studio. We're talking about the issue of how to change the perception, Mule, and you are to come in and tell us how we can change that ideology of taking money from the people who are vying. And how we are a reflection of society, of the leaders that we deserve. That's what, frankly, we left off from.
First, just a quick response on the issue that you had earlier discussed in terms of violence. Kibra has been documented as a hotspot in the past. Therefore, it should be expected that there's good security. That, like Prof was saying, this is information that people will know beforehand. It was not documented as a hotspot just yesterday. It has been documented all the way from, I think, 2007. Correct. So the expectation is that the authorities which are in place should be able to apprehend the situation. And it is expected, of course, that there will be tensions towards the vote closing and counting because of the kind of outcomes that may come through. So that's just a pick on that point. On the question of the kind of culture that we have in the country, as I alluded earlier, I think for me, we need to walk towards the path of citizen agency. We are still a young democracy. In all intents and purposes, Kenya is still not a very old democracy. There are countries which have gone through eons of change as far as democratic thinking is concerned. So we are still getting to understand. One of the reasons why I think there was a push towards devolution was to try to get this idea closer to the people, the idea of government, the idea of democratic dispensation closer to the people. Now people in the rural areas are starting to understand those transactions, those engagements with the authorities, with the so-called presidents in the local areas. So if we push that agenda further with even political education and making them to understand, I would love a situation where citizens are able to recall their members of parliament, they're able to recall their MCAs, because we have those laws. They're able to, what is happening in Taita Taveta in terms of recalling the government or the entire government. I'd like a process towards that kind of engagement that empowers the citizen to start understanding that they have power to withdraw even their support of their elected leaders or their governments. Now, that kind of thinking is what now creates an agency that can be able to be responsive to some of the negatives that we have. Do voters understand the sort of power that they have? You've clearly just spelled it out for us very well, how despite the fact that you can put someone in parliament tomorrow, as a voter, as a Kenyan, you have the right to recall them and question. Do Kenyans understand the sort of power that they have as voters? I think that's where the problem is, because if now we can engage on that level, if we can be able to help them understand that, all the institutions that we have in the country, the actors that we have in the country, if you can be able to move Kenyans to that understanding, that the same power, if you tell this Kibra, you have the power to get this guy, whether you want Imran or you want Mariga or you want Editor or Chieng, you can take them in and you can also take them out. That power, that understanding, that you can even interrogate the entire process, including budget-making processes, including, engagement with the legislative arms within the counties and within the nation. That understanding is something that, for me, I think from where I sit, I still find many gaps. And if that was to gain some currency and traction, perhaps we'd start changing the nation. All right, Professor, do you agree with that? I don't quite buy that. It's a good idea, it's lofty, let citizens have the power. Why? It's too of a fairy tale. You see why it doesn't really excite me is that you need a legal infrastructure to do that. If you want to recall MPs, for example, you need a better law than the one in place now.
anything you want to give power to the citizens to do certain things, you can't do it outside the law. So you need to create law. The people who will have to create that law will themselves be the victims. Prof, if the laws are in place.
Hold that thought in just a bit. We have Winnie Odinga speaking right now in Kibra. Let's listen in after she's just voted.
It's not really a vote, it's a surrender. And so I encourage everybody to come out, to cast their vote, and keep vigilant and make sure that everything goes well until the end. Yes.
The expectation?
Obviously, a landslide win. There are no other expectations. We expect to win. We've had our challenges with the Electoral Commission today, but that will not stop us. We will not falter. We will not be cowed. And we're here to not only vote, but to protect our vote. Yes. All right. Mike.
Prof, you're finishing your thoughts on structures, and you can also react to what she just said.
In order to give the citizens... Pardon?
You can also react to what she just said. They voted and they'll guard their votes throughout.
Yeah, well, how do citizens guard votes? You know, we must be able to trust the processes. How processes are good enough for us to vote and go home and wait for results. That's what I was saying, for example. People will be forced to stay around and guard their vote because the IBC will take 10 hours to do what should be done in an hour. That's simple way of doing things that I talked about. But back to what we are saying, I was saying, in order to give the citizen power to do certain things, like calling the MPs, like I've said, you need laws. The people to make laws will be the victims if those laws were put in place. And therefore, you will not get those laws. Even where by chance you get the laws, they will not be obeyed. If Chapter 6, for example, just one chapter in the Constitution, if Chapter 6 was followed, if we hadn't suspended Chapter 6, this country would be different. The kind of leaders we have today, it will be Trevor and I who will be in Parliament, and all these thugs who are there. So, one, making the laws will be difficult to give citizens power. Two, even where the laws are made, like the ones we have now, which came because of the struggle through the constitution-making process, they are not being followed. And I get back to what I said. Things will work in this country, because we are unlikely to get a Thomas Sankara or a Gaddafi, like you say. Things will work in this country because there's leadership, and President Uhuru Kenyatta said and alluded to this, that we are pushing people into a revolution. Yeah. It was said by Uhuru himself, not Manyora. In other words, the levels of poverty in this country are such that people will get to a point where they can take it no more. You get it? The impunity with which our leaders are doing. Look at Parliament, for example. Look at how much money they just give themselves. People get so angry in this country, and not long from now, they will act. That's what I'm talking about. That, to me, seems to be the way we are going, unless, like Kuria says, they have their Damascus moment.
So this act that you're talking about, and there's been some concerns on the statement that you just made, this action that you're talking about, what do you mean? When you're saying that the people are being pushed to the wall, and they will act. The only way they can act
I have told you, even President Uhuru himself said, he told leaders, don't do things the way you are doing them. Don't push people. People can act. Kenya won't be the first country that people act. When people get annoyed, there is no limit what they do. That's what I'm saying. It is happening every day in the world.
I just quickly joined to the issue that how he's argued the case out. Because I think we're on the same page, but maybe we are
you are putting it differently. Using glasses and I'm using...
Yes. Because, you see, for citizen agency to work, and even for citizens to get to the level of frustration that the president and now Manyora has said, that they get to a level where they're so frustrated that they can be able, they have no other recourse but to rise up. They must explore whatever alternatives are there. I mean, they must explore them first. If they, every time, if it's like you know, putting pressure on a pipe. If there's no ventilation, then you'll expect the jet to come out from the other end. But if there is going to be ventilation, there are still some valves here and there. Then I mean, it will not flow directly. So for me, the question is, are there opportunities that citizens can be able to still use? Do they, or are there perceptions of opportunities that the citizens can be able to use and exploit and employ their agency? If they are still there, then they'll not get to that level where they can be able to say, no, we can't see another road.
But Prof's argument is that those laws will not come because the same people who are making those laws.
No, some of the laws are there, Trevor.
And those which are there will not be followed, as indeed you and I on this table know. They are very good laws, but that are not being followed.
But you see, my argument, Prof, is this, that yes. For instance, on Chapter 6 and even the right to recall, yes. How has that been exercised so far as to fail? You know, the question is, yes, some of them may not be followed, but we are not working with the assumption that they'll fail. We need to work with the assumption that they have actually tried everything. They have actually gone to try to recall their members of parliament, and they are not getting them recalled. That's a frustration. So you have to exploit this opportunity.
Let me give you a good example. Let me give you an example. First of all, you must agree with me that the recall law is very difficult to implement, number one. Let's go, for example, what people have tried, Makina and other places, where the people of a county can ask the president, according to the constitution, yes. that he county yetu, vunjilia mbali, we start afresh. What does the president do? He selects Manyora and you and the other guy, perhaps with the brief, imambo achana nayo hii. So, after people have expressed their wish, collected all the signatures you can think of, it is still left to one man to decide whether their will be done or not. So I'm telling you, it is difficult. And mine, I'm not inciting anybody, and I've done this repeatedly. What I'm telling our leaders is to smell the coffee. Is that what we are doing in this country is not sustainable. You
true.
Cannot have an economic model where a handful of people are living comfortable, eating well, when the rest are going to... World Bank statistics say almost 50% of Kenyans go to bed hungry, live on less than $1 a day, on less than a shilling a day. Where I come from, the village, the thing they call gorogoro, the 2 tin for maize, what wanaita sasa bamba mia, it has gotten to 100 with that tin of maize. The leaders ought to know, and this is the point I'm saying, in their own interest, so that they may continue living in Lavington and their children will inherit those houses. While they enjoy life on the first lane, let them ensure somebody in Kibra can at least have uji na maharage only. That is how other countries do. The rich make sure that for them to enjoy what they have, the poor must have the minimum you need to survive.
Okay.
So we are operating on a model in this country where the poor don't even have the minimum to survive.
Right.
Not to live well, just to survive.
Frank, even as you're coming in, the one individual that you're seeing on your screens right now is Monica Okoth, the wife of the late Ken Okoth, casting her ballot at the old Kibra Primary School, where we're also expecting Honorable Raila Odinga to cast his ballot alongside Imran Okoth, the ODM candidate for these Kibra by-elections. You've just seen she's casted her ballot. Frank.
Thank you. I'm listening to Prof, and I'm finding him quite pessimistic, honestly, with due respect. This country must be hopeful. And I'm certain that we have sufficient policy legal framework. The challenge is implementation. And the implementation challenge is arising from the civic competence of citizens to put pressure and demand accountability from the elected leaders. And that's what Mule is eloquently articulating, that there is sufficient framework. It's how do we get the citizenry to make sure the demand side of things is sufficient. Are we due for a revolution? I think we're still quite a little bit far off, again, down to civic competence. This country is highly ethnicized, and even the hungry will still quickly identify themselves with their ethnicity when hunger has not any tribe or particular name. So we still far off until particularly the middle class can be able to come out strongly to agitate for their rights. On the question of violence, and we have interacted this in Kibra, and violence, yes, Kibra is a hotspot, but if you listen to the people, they are keen on the transparency, fairness, integrity of the process, credibility of the process, and therefore the legitimacy of the outcome. In this country, it is clear that the people know the outcome of election results, of the elections, because they voted. And they talk to each other after. So if in any case that IEBC gives us different results from what the people feel, that is what is going to be the cause of violence. Otherwise, we should expect a peaceful Kibra after this poll.
But do you think that is a result of the leaders? Because just before we came back from it, Babu Owino was saying that if so-and-so is not announced as the winner, then there will be a problem. Because after that, then the supporters also feel if that should not be the result, then there will be some level
Even
of
if
chaos.
the leaders go to the incitement route, like we've had some of those inflammatory statements before, and the things that have been happening in Kibra, the veracity of the violence will be different. Where people feel properly jilted, the levels of violence will be higher. Where people feel that we're being cajoled into this, there will be flashes here and there, and then things will come.
Franklin, at the beginning of this discussion, you talked about how this specific Kibra by-election is going to be hitting, and quote, the soft underbelly of most political parties, is how you put it. If a non-ODM candidate, if 23 other candidates beat Okoth, what does that say? What does that mean for Kenya's biggest political opposition party having to lose in their own quote-unquote bedroom?
I think it will be difficult for ODM to, it will be a bitter pill for ODM to swallow if they lose it to ANC or Jubilee or Ford Kenya.
Or any of the other 23 candidates.
I think if they lose it to any other outside the three that I have mentioned, Ford Kenya, ANC, and Jubilee, they'll try to brush it off and say we made our mistakes here and there, and that is it, we will correct it. But if actually they lose it, then it will be a wake-up call to ODM. I mean, there have been some writings on the wall that the way the party has organized itself before in terms of how they approach their campaigns, how they choose their candidates, they tried as much as possible to clean up those issues in Kibra, and Imran was chosen pretty much with a few challenges, and quite the leader, Raila Odinga, managed to quickly get those issues resolved and sort it. So the biggest risk for ODM as a party is losing it to either Ford Kenya, ODM, or ANC or Jubilee. The others, it will be a good surprise, but I think they will still find a way of explaining it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Msawa, as an election observer, what do you have to say? If another candidate that is not Okoth wins the Kibra by-election, what does that mean for Kenya's biggest opposition party?
From an election observer, anybody should win. Anybody can win that election. So we are good with anybody winning that election. It is the political implications that you're asking, which, as Frank has very well explained, that being an ODM zone, an ODM bedrock constituency, then the expectation is that ODM should be able to retain the seat. If they don't, then of course there must be new permutations in terms of how then they're going to address themselves as a big party in the country, which is if it loses to the smaller parties, then they have to ask bigger questions about how we did it. If they lose to their closest rivals, then of course it sets the stage, which I think my colleagues have talked about. It sets the stage for the 2022 politics in terms of how the combinations in terms of coalition building, who do you want to work with, did that formula in Kibra work, do we need to realign ourselves? So I think there are going to be political consequences.
As we come to an end on this discussion, I want to take from you, how do we change this issue of tribal and party politics? Because even if we have a leader from any of the communities, they'll still belong to a certain tribe. How do we change that mentality?
You know, when people say people are basing the elections on tribe, honestly, I don't know what they mean. You must base on something. There are always demographies. And if it's in America, they have their own demographies, informed by their own history and their own dynamics. For the time being, tribe will remain the main demography. So when you go out there, you can be addressing the church like Ruto did in the 2010 constitution, the no campaign. He had very serious issues he raised, which the church agreed with. But when it came to voting, they voted as Kikuis. And where were the Kikuis voting? They voted maybe yes. They voted as Luos, as Luyas. So for a while that will be the case. And there is nothing wrong with that so much, except when we over-mobilize using the tribe, and we militarize that, we create situations where violence becomes very easy to flow. That will be wrong. But the people mobilizing along tribe, there's nothing wrong. However, a new thing is emerging. First of all, we thought with education, with all these universities, and you know, by the way, we have hundreds of thousands of students in our universities today, every year. We thought with all these new universities and colleges, like Achebe had said sometime back in 1989, that there will be a different way of looking at things. But the youth remained Kikuyu, Luo, Doromo, and Okoth. They never moved. There's something that is blowing in this country. This hustler thing is creating a new demography. And I've been saying this, and I say I look at Raila in the eye and Uhuru. If you do not know the hustler narrative is there, it is, I think it's Sonko who started this thing of having Kenyans who really have not been considered for anything, the joblessness, the suffering people, the mamambogas, the hawkers who are harassed by us all every day. Sonko was not appealing to them. And then Ruto came with the hustler narrative and he's run away with it. If this guy wins in Kibra today, what do you call him? Mariga. It will be because Raila has ignored the hustler narrative that I told him about.
Professor